Good day, everyone, and welcome to the news behind the news right here on Mix 94.7 FM. You're listening to Ralph Contav, and today I'm joined with another guest, Miss Ayana Tyrell Lake. Welcome to the program. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Ralph.
Okay, so we go back quite a while.
We do.
But I'm pretty sure that there are many people listening who are not aware of who you are. So could you give us an intro about yourself and what do you do? What have you been up to?
Oh, wow. I hate this part. But my name is Ayana Mina Tyrell Lake. I am a daughter of the soil. I am the daughter of Joseph Lake Jr. and the granddaughter of Jose Lake Sr. I have studied abroad and I've trained to be a barrister, which is also known as an attorney, just in a different jurisdiction. And I've just been traveling and working abroad and doing different things, but pretty much working in the legal system, working for law firms and Fortune 500 companies. Okay,
great. I think this goes without saying, but I'll still ask a question. What inspired you to study law? I'm guessing it's the background you come from. Was it your father's influence or a personal choice?
I don't know if we have choice like that. I think the blood dictates to some extent. I've always been around politics, so that's always been an interest. But you've gone down the political science route, and I just went down the legal route. I wanted to represent my people. I remember I was 5 years old, maybe 4 or 5, and I said to my mom I wanted to be a judge. She said, okay. She calls me Nana or Ayu. She said, all right, okay. And then the year after I came back to her and I said, Mommy, I don't want to be a judge anymore. She said, why? I said, because all he does is sit there. I want to represent the people. And I remember I was watching the news and there was a lady, she took an iron or a goose and she branded her child. And I just remember that stuck with me. And I said, I wanted to be the voice of the innocents. And it took me 20 plus years to achieve that goal. And before my 28th birthday, I was called to the Utter Bar of England and Wales. I think I was probably the first St. Martiner to do that. I'm not sure, but it probably was the first as a barrister. So it was a very special moment. But I'll verify. Don't hold me. That's my disclaimer. But I do think I was the first. So yeah, that's one of the reasons I wanted to become a lawyer.
Okay. And why the UK in particular? Why did you choose to study there?
Why the UK in particular? It's so interesting. Where else would I have gone that would have permitted me access to some extent to St. Martin? At the time, I went to an English-speaking school. And if I had studied American law, I would not have access to European law or have the rights of access in Europe. So where is the only other country can I study that the language of instruction is English? And thereby giving me access to some extent of our jurisdiction, because our jurisdiction falls under European law. So that's why I went to England. And I've always wanted to go to England, to be quite honest. I feel like most St. Martiners, we speak English in our homes, English or Creole or whatever, but predominantly English. So that was a no-brainer for me.
That's pretty interesting. And it's interesting also because usually students are always encouraged to, if they're going to study law, to study law in the Netherlands. But as you mentioned, most of us, like myself included, studied at St. Martin Academy or another high school where you learn English and Dutch as a second language.
Can we pause for a moment for our alma mater? Big up to St. Martin Academy.
Did you go to Mac school too?
Yeah, I did as well.
There you go. That's a road to success. So yeah, and then you also have where in our constitution, it states that English is our official language and Dutch. Yet, Dutch is given the predominance, in whether it's in government, but just in general. And so, why do you was it intent for you to go against that grain in sense of not, studying law in the Netherlands?
Not necessarily, but how do I study law in a language that I don't understand? And let's be honest, the level of Dutch that we are taught in the Caribbean or on this island is rudimentary. So how do I then begin to analyze a very technical concept or technical language? It just felt like I would have been at a deficit or just playing catch up. There is no way that I think maybe my mind could, but I don't think that I was able to understand or grasp it, because even from an English perspective, it was super hard. It was super hard to do my law degree. It was super hard to then do my postgrad and be called to the bar. It was hard all around. And I think I have somewhat of a good understanding or mastery of the English language to just a little extent. And that was hard. So how do I then speak in a language that is foreign to me, or learn in a language that is so foreign to me? There was no way I could have done that.
Yeah.
There was no way I could have done that.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. So on that note, I want to definitely get into what we talked about off air, which was law reform and people's access to the laws, because as we know, besides the fact that while Dutch is taught in schools, majority of our population don't speak Dutch, and that's also because a significant portion of our population come from other countries where they speak Creole, Spanish, etc. So let's get into that discussion on the access to the law in a language that you understand.
I think that's paramount, because like we were discussing off air, how is one supposed to have adequate or equitable representation before the law or before the courts if you don't even understand what's happening? And then for you to say, and it's a fundamental human right also. Do you know what I mean? It falls on the Declaration of Human Rights. Whereas though it's not binding, is universally accepted on the conventions and norms, and even the Geneva Convention as well. So it's just like, how are you to represent, argue your case when you don't have access? And I feel, if I'm not mistaken, there were some of the civil code or organic laws that were translated by a private company. Shout out to Mr. Franca, because he was actually trying to get me some of those copies. I have time for him. But it shouldn't be that way. We should be able to access it on all platforms. It should be on a database for students of this island. I know that they were trying to incorporate, preliminary introduction to law at the University of St. Maarten and stuff like that. But if our organic laws isn't accessible, how are these students supposed to even understand and begin the process of learning how to represent their people? So for me, I think having access to the legal system, and also I would like to give a shout out to Karina or Jessica, Miss Weeks, because this is an issue that is close to both of our hearts, because both of us view this as a fundamental human rights issue.
Indeed.
If you're not able to access your legal system or understand it, you're at a disadvantage. There's no way you will be able to have a fair trial. So it's paramount that we start the conversation or start the translation of most of the laws into the language of instructions in school. If I'm not mistaken, 90% or 100% of the schools on the Dutch side of the island now, even Sister Borkia or Regina, they're in English now, aren't they? The language of instructions. So 90%. Majority, yes. So then you have 90% of the population speaking, writing, or literate in English and illiterate in Dutch. But then you still have the system in Dutch Parliament is conducted in English, but yet laws are passed in Dutch. It's just so. So
you know what's funny about that? It's
crazy to me.
Because, one of the things we do have, and you can piggyback off of that. Okay, we do have in the courts where they provide a translator, for you to understand what's going on.
But it shouldn't be.
Yeah, and I understand what you're saying. Yes, correct. And in addition to that, what I'm thinking about, I think it was Frantz Fanon who spoke about the schizophrenia of being a colonized individual. Yeah. Because on one end we are Caribbean natives, we are St. Martiners, but then because of the structure, you're forced to become new. Yeah. You're forced to become something else. Yeah. And then you also have people who will then have to code switch. Yeah. Switch identities. Yeah. And I think part of the issue with the language barrier is concerned is that it definitely creates a hard divide. It does. This sense of elitism. Yeah. You don't speak Dutch. You don't deserve this job, or I even see sometimes.
And it ostracizes us as well. So it places a huge percentage of the population at a disadvantage, and I dare to argue almost discriminates against those the few of us that have actually been educated in an English system. And not only that, my father has always said individuals should be tried by their peers.
Yeah.
And that's standard. So if you are a Dutch judge living and working on this island, you should be able to speak the language of the people.
Mm-hmm.
And you should be able to understand that. And not only that, when the judgment order of this court, this honorable court is passed, like the court of the first instance in St. Maarten is passed, is also always that passed in Dutch.
Yes.
But if a person does not understand it, it should be passed in English.
Correct.
So you then make that person, put that person at a disadvantage from an economical perspective, because then they have to go and seek a translator to pay for the order of the court, which they should have a right to request it in English, because our constitution dictates that English and Dutch are our legal languages. So a person should have the right to choose how they want their trial to be conducted and how they want their documentations to be documented. Because perfect example as well, there was a gentleman that I knew that wanted to report something at the police station. He's of Dominican heritage, but a St. Martiner. And he went to the police station to report what had happened, and they gave him his report back in Dutch. This man does not read or understand Dutch on any level. So how is that? How do you even begin to process that or think that's normal or right? It's not. His report should have been in the language that he reported it in.
And what you have, because on few instances I attended court hearings as a reporter, and here in some cases, the judge would speak in English, but then you would have certain judges in particular who, when they don't feel comfortable, because then they have their insecurity, but speaking English, they would just do the whole not seminar. Let's say the whole court case in Dutch. And then the lawyers as well, from what I understand, they have the choice to speak in English. Even the judge speaks in Dutch. But apparently, the situation you have now is the fact that some lawyers will admit that for them, they feel like their case holds more water if they speak in Dutch. So then that goes again, this changing of identity, for the sake of, I guess, your natural being is not valued, perhaps, I would say.
And to piggyback off of Frantz Fanon, W.E. Dupas speaks about that duality as well. Do you know what I mean? That separation of one's identity to become other. And I feel like, but as long as we remain a colony, because that's what we are, and we don't want to acknowledge that.
I think we do.
As long as we remain a colony with some autonomy, but not true independence, we're going to be in this constant state of duality and never truly existing or belonging anywhere.
Yeah. And to think of something your father said, which I remember referencing in a debate in one of my political science class. He said this in reference to African Americans. Paraphrasing now, he said, they're eternally colonized. Because I was like, wow, that's deep. Because there's constantly that fight for acceptance, for being treated as a equal citizen to the dominant class. But you're in a state where the entire structure is, I won't say foreign, but your being. Whereas here, what makes it different is, from bottom up, you see your people. Well, St. Maarten, no, that is even a debate. But I got that feeling. I remember when I first went to Jamaica, and then when my parents took me to Haiti. It was just amazing. I couldn't describe it. Like, even though we know here in St. Maarten we have a lot of locals in positions of power, etc. We Parliament is majority local, let's say, and so forth. It still felt different when I landed in those two countries, because I know, from the beggar up to every single other position available till prime minister or president, it's that native person. And I think that is where we get, where we aspire to be, in terms of our back and forth about what. I mean, it's sad that we still have back and forth about, whether locals should get a position in, let's say, a government-owned company or so forth. So, That was a mouthful.
It was, but I can't contest anything that you've said because it is valid, and I feel that there's a strong sense of pride. But all of those countries from Haiti to Jamaica are independent.
Correct.
So therefore,
Correct.
they are able to define their own identity.
Correct.
And conduct themselves accordingly. So like when I think it was one of the ministers of Jamaica say, listen, they could keep their vaccine until we're going to see what happens to them in Europe before I give it to my people. Do you know what I mean? He has the kahunas to do that because he's protected. It's his nation. So if he wants to see how it plays out first before distributing it amongst his citizens, he has the right to do so. But when you're not I can't even say autonomous because St. Martin has some autonomy, but when you're not independent, this is what happens. And when we are, it's so interesting because I also started like a second master's in like international relations with a focus on human rights.
Interesting.
And you think like, oh, why isn't this done and why isn't that done? And when you truly understand, when you get deeper into the understanding of, international relations and the various stakeholders and the hegemons and how they arrange politics across the world, you truly understand that you're a little fish in a real big ocean. Yeah. And once you identify, and the countries that have identified with Black politics or Black identity have been sanctioned. You look at Cuba, you look at Haiti. Do you know what I mean? You look at Zimbabwe. Well, Mugabe, I'm on the fence with him. When he started, I understood where he was coming from, and then he just went
power corrupts absolutely.
Exactly. I was gonna quote Denning as well. Lord Denning said that. So it was just like, exactly. So you understand where he was going, but then he just left, followed the plot. But then the conversation becomes, how do we claim our independence? And this was a conversation I had with my dad last night itself. I said, like Patrice Lobamba said, he said, freedom or independence isn't asked for, it is taken. So as long as we're still asking to be free, we will never be free. Because that's the mindset. So for me, it's just like,
you take it by force.
You take it, and obviously you don't. It doesn't have to be a bloodshed situation. Jamaica be peaceful, but I don't know any revolution that has occurred. I don't know true transformation or a birthing of a nation that didn't come with a revolution.
Birthing of a nation. None that I could think of.
I can't think of any off the bat.
Our revolution that was, I would say, peaceful. I mean, somebody did get their head beaten. Was Grenada. I think no one died during their revolution. I don't mean before
the assassination.
Died. No, I mean like when Maurice's party took over the Gary government. That in that period, I don't think there was any.
Wasn't he assassinated?
Yeah, and the end.
Exactly.
Yeah, correct.
So at the end of the day, do you know what I mean? No matter how you try to do it, if you're anti the system, it's by hook or by crook. I always said any African leader that's approved or vetted by Europe or the US is already sold out.
I guess it's so questionable.
It's so questionable. But again, it just reverts back. This is how we transform the legal system, by transforming our political identity. Do you know what I mean? How do we, and more so, how do we integrate more into the Caribbean region? Because this is the region we are a part of. So Guadeloupe did something that was very interesting. Guadeloupe submitted themselves to the Organization of the Eastern Caribbean States. And as like the Supreme Court as well. So I thought that was very interesting because they were like one of the first French Caribbean islands to submit themselves under said jurisdiction. Do you see what I'm saying? So there's more of an inter-exchange as it relates to certain things, whether that's enforceability, whether that's the legal system. I feel like St. Martin St. Martin is such an anomaly and a unicorn in and of itself. To some extent, we could use the principles that are already set up in St. Lucia, because St. Lucia exists under civil and common law.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? That duality exists in the legal system.
Honestly, that's something. Can you break that down? Let me. Yes.
Well, obviously. So I've not practiced in St. Lucia, but I do know that St. Lucian lawyers will have the rights to the civil courts, as in how the Dutch system is, and how the common law system is, how the UK system is. So they will just have to get do an additional exam or something to then be permitted to access both courts.
Okay, no, I understand.
So it's possible we could, if we follow and more, if we did a thorough research into how St. Lucia was able to integrate both legal systems and use that as an example for St. Maarten, I think it's a good way for us to coexist with the old and integrate into the new, as in within the islands around us. Because there's strength in unity.
And you said something interesting, because this has been definitely a hot topic during the height of the pandemic, and particularly where St. Maarten had its issues with the Netherlands and the liquidity loans, which is, seeking membership and part of CARICOM, or even recently a member of parliament asking the Prime Minister about our potential membership with OECS. But I can't help but think about how will we mesh with the aims and objectives of those organizations. Reason being, for example, CARICOM, which has the Commission for a lot of words that keeps slipping my mind, like the repayment for slavery reparations. The Reparations Commission. Let's say just with that, how will we, whose foreign affairs is governed by the Netherlands, how will St. Maarten be able to identify as a Caribbean nation that is seeking reparations, while at the same time the person who has to pay the reparations it also controls your foreign affairs and who you associate with, your foreign policy and the like.
And hence the reason why we haven't been able to trade and to truly immerse ourselves within CARICOM or become part of the African Union. Do you know what I mean?
And then there's the money discussion.
Then there's the money discussion as well. So it's just like, there's no way to answer that question unless you go for independence. There's no way to answer that question, because the person that controls your foreign affairs won't allow you or permit you to truly engage on that level. So we are just observers of CARICOM still, aren't we?
Yes, and so I think we're seeking associate membership.
We're seeking associate membership, but how do we do that when we're not independent?
That's a good question that I started looking to answer. It is possible.
It is possible.
Because, again, it's only a measure, but there's a measure of autonomy where St. Maarten can, create certain relations and so forth. But that would...
I was just saying, but if we're finding it difficult to create relations between French and Dutch St. Maarten, how are you going to
Which is ironic, because if you go to Europe, I mean, it's like...
It's one. I came home and I was trying to send money to my mom. And I went to Western Union in Simpson Bay. They told me, because I have a French passport. I didn't have my Dutch ID wasn't on me, but I had my French passport on me. I needed to go to the French side to send money. I couldn't even believe the foolishness I was hearing. And I was just like, Europe is becoming one. And I felt, and I really hoped that St. Maarten would have become more integrated, more one, because, I have time for our Prime Minister. I think she's doing a phenomenal job. And I think the Vice President on the French side is doing a phenomenal job. However, I felt like, and they're homegrown, they're grassroots, they're women of the soil, they're daughters of the soil. So I felt like, why are we allowing these private entities to govern and dictate, divide? Even when I went to the bank, and I was trying to reactivate, set up, do whatever, and they were telling me I needed to prove my links to this island. That's what the woman told me. I needed to prove my links to this island. And that goes
back several generations,
and
right?
I was just like, several generations being a daughter of this soil. And I just looked at this woman like, there's a ballpark named after my grandfather. Do you know what I mean? So they were like, and I feel like it puts St. Maarteners, French and Dutch, North and South, in a very precarious position, because if you are a St. Maartener, you're a St. Maartener.
Correct.
Born, bred, or grew up. Do you know what I mean? French or Dutch, you are a St. Maartener. So why are there such rigorous and contentious policies in place that affect the Northerners more than the South? It just doesn't make sense to me. So she wanted me, I said, so what do I need to set up a resident account? I was like, Mom, I'm living over here. I'm by daddy. Do you know what I mean? So it's just like, what are you talking to me about?
Yeah.
Oh, but then you need I don't live on the front side. Like,
yeah, you
so
just
I
have
couldn't.
to pass.
So she
yeah.
pretty much I was denied.
Wow.
I was denied access to a bank account, a resident or a non-resident account, because I didn't meet the criteria. So I fall somewhere in the middle, as most St. Martiners do, because my mom is French, my dad is Dutch. I am both. Do you know what I mean? So I fall somewhere in the middle, and she refused. I was unable to open an account.
And right there, you see already the loopholes for, let's say, the non-black and white transactions.
But an American can come here.
But you're forced to function in that way because the system itself rejects you.
Exactly. And I felt more of a foreigner here in my own country than I have in Europe. And even when I went to immigration, it's always a problem. Do you know what I mean? I just came from immigration this morning, and just the system, you're like, are you kidding me? The whole process, and you're like, wow.
Yeah.
We really, really do need to do better.
Yeah. So that goes back to the intro. There is a significant need for reform when that's concerned. And even one thing you said from the beginning of our discussion, I thought about. I remember certain members of parliament who expressed, the fact that they don't know Dutch and they were ridiculed. But I'm like, most of us don't speak Dutch anyhow.
Exactly.
So like, you laugh at your own self.
And you shouldn't be. And there's opportunities that are being denied to St. Martiners who have the skill and the knowledge just because they don't speak Dutch. But then you have our educational system, 90% of it is the language of instruction is in English. So why penalize us for going through the process? Do you know what I mean? God bless Google Translate. Do you know what I mean?
Best that it can do.
For the best that it can do. But it's just like that whole mindset has to change. Because again, we're succumbing to our colonial masters and how they want us to conduct ourselves and act. And I don't necessarily think that's the right way to do things at all. So that mindset is really detrimental, because you have people who just could praat in the Netherlands but aren't educated or skilled to do the job. So again, the curry favor, the favoritism, that's where we fall short as well. Okay. So when I come home, like anything I do, I use my mother's name, because I don't want to be like, oh, with my family, you either love us or hate us. There's no in between. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, they have their history.
And we are going to fight for this land at all costs.
Correct.
So, but then if you don't want to be blacklisted, you just like go in with a synonym. And they be like, oh, okay. And then they find out. But it's just like, at least I'm not going in with any favors or disadvantage from any perspective. I'm going in as Ayana.
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back. Welcome back, listeners. You're listening to the news behind the news on Mix 94.7 FM. This is Ralph Kintab, and I'm joined with Miss Ayana Tyrell Lake. So earlier in our discussion, we spoke quite a bit about St. Martin's legal system and language of instruction and the mix in between all of that. But one of the things that came to mind that I definitely want to get into is our border. Because in recent years, we've definitely seen the hardening of our border. And listening to our parents or grandparents speak about St. Martin, there wasn't that hardline Dutch, French side. It was you're going over to Marigot, and or in the other way you're going into Great Bay. But with Hurricane Irma, we saw where a container was placed that solidify the border. Like, y'all stay over there, we're going to stay over here. And worse yet, with COVID, the pandemic, in several instances, it was hardline again to the extent that several protests had to take place that led to its opening. So what can you share with us in terms of ways in which we definitely have to protect that heritage that we have of an open border, but also increase our efforts to unite the both sides, unite people?
I think it's the Treaty of Concordia that stands as relates to the border of St. Martin. Why haven't we made our own treaty?
Well, my question is, can we make our own treaty?
Well, that's one to truly figure out. To some extent, we have autonomy on the Dutch side of the island, right? And to some extent, the municipal or the collectivité have their own autonomy as well. But obviously, you have to go through the préfet. that could be a suggestion. We can actually make our own bills or pass our own laws as it relates to that. We should be able to, or at least
that's definitely
put it
worth
on the
exploring.
agenda point. It's worth exploring. I mean, I just thought of it. Do you know what I mean? So like, why should that treaty be the only treaty that stands as it relates to the unification of St. Martin, or how we have always lived as a people? It's more than that. And I feel like anyone that's coming in has to understand the history of this island.
I'm glad you mentioned
Do you know
that.
what I mean? Because we're very unique in and of itself. So I would start by exploring that possibility of actually implementing it into our legal system, our organic laws on this island, on in the north and south, to see if that's a real possibility. But again, when you have no control of your foreign affairs, and French St. Martin definitely does not.
Yeah, because France is
in complete control. We are not even a département. We are directly part of France. So the systems are draconian for me, and very harsh, because we don't have access to anything. We don't have access to the same facilities as they do in Europe, but yet we have to subject ourselves to the same standard as Europe. So maybe exploring that a bit more, maybe trying to seek more autonomy in the north, so the north and the south can actually come together and create something that is binding, whether that's or even if we're not able to do it on a legislative basis, but maybe on even a contractual basis. Because contracts are binding, and we choose the jurisdiction in which we want those contracts to be adhered to. So maybe from a contractual basis, the government of St. Martin and the collectivité of French St. Martin can enter into a contractually binding agreement that states and dictates X, Y, and Z. It's a way of circumventing the foreign policies, but it just came to mind.
Okay, and definitely worth exploring.
Definitely worth exploring. And I mean, if it's a yes, then it's great. If it's a no, then we've tried. But to not have tried at all.
Yeah, that wouldn't be good.
That wouldn't be good.
So another thing that comes to mind, you mentioned history. I have a question for you.
Okay.
Besides Caribbean history in CXC, in academy, did you learn any St. Martin history in school?
No.
Okay.
Definitely not. My history was taught in my house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I asked that, because I think that is where it first has to start. And definitely not even high school. From primary. Because, okay, fine, you may have where we have an influx of various cultures, but we know naturally children, share what they learn with their parents. And so already when people come in, they're unaware of, like, what is St. Martin about really? Like I came to St. Martin before Hurricane Lewis. Let's say I came in 1990 or 80s. Like, how did this island come about to be this tourism giant or whatever? Who are the people who are the movers and shakers and so forth? This is critical information. What makes up a significant part of its culture. But what you have is persons come here and then they're like, well, this is free game. I'll just dump whatever, or not. I won't say dump alone, but I'll just bring whatever I have and establish it here. And what you have is various practices becoming the new culture, if you get what I'm saying. Yeah,
but culture is a living organism, just like the legal system. It evolves with the people. So fundamentally, we are who we are at essence. And I saw, and this is where my father would argue that there has to be literature from our people in primary school. So your book, Daddy's book, Uncle Asana book. I feel like every primary school student should have read national symbols.
Yeah.
It should be a core reading in every school on the island, period. Because if you don't understand your history, you don't understand where you're going, and that's fundamental. So, like, again, if we don't have a collection of St. Martin writers, how we express ourselves, for example, when we say we's we, do you know what I mean? That's intrinsically us, or who you for, don't humbug me up. Do you know what I mean? Just how we express ourselves, colloquialisms, our being. And I feel like we've learned and grown as a people as well to understand that the duality can exist, not just as it relates to our European Caribbean identity, but our Caribbean to Caribbean identity.
Correct.
Because we are one. I saw a tattoo that a friend had on, and it was the perfect example that defined who he was. He had an island of Dominica on one side, the island of St. Martin on the next, and a man in the middle. So the islands formed the wings. And I was just like, that is so profound in himself, because he could understand his parents are of Dominican heritage, but he was raised here. He was born in DA, but he was raised here. He came when he was 3 or 4. So understanding the complexity of our identity doesn't mean that we subtract or take away from any, but there is something that's fundamentally us, how we speak, how we eat, how we do certain things, our hospitality. There is history there, but like you said, it's the history that needs to be taught to every St. Martiner coming in, whether you are several generations like me or first, second, or third generations like others. You're grounded in knowing this is who I am. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I am a beautiful blend of this, but this soil, like the salt runs through my veins.
Yeah.
The salt of this land, Swaliga, runs through my veins. So I feel like I agree with you when we talk about the educational system has to start teaching our culture first before we start exploring any other.
Correct. And so the bottom line of our discussion really ties into nation building.
Always.
Yeah. And would you say that our diversity makes it harder?
Not at all.
Okay.
Not at all. I don't think that our diversity makes it harder. I think we've always been a diverse people. St. Martin, as clear as when the sky is clear, you can see 5 islands. Is it 5 or 6 clearly?
Definitely St. Bart's, Saba, Statia, St. Kitts, Anguilla. Yeah. 5 and let's say 5.
Yeah, so you can say 5. So my father's telling me a story a long time ago that when the Amerindians came here, they just thought that they were swimming between the same river, and the people were one. And that has always been us. We have always been one people. There's no way that you could be from St. Martin and not have roots in Anguilla, Saba, St. Kitts, Statia, Nevis, Santo, Aruba. Do you know what I mean? Because we all migrated.
Even as far down as Panama?
Even as far down as Panama, because we migrated, so with the oil refinery in Aruba, St. Martin has moved down there. When there was sugar cane in Santo, they moved down there. So that's why you have the mixing of these people, Santo, Haiti, you have the mixing of these people coming back because this is where they were always from. So I don't think the diversity makes it difficult. I think the diversity identifies our richness.
Nice.
Yeah, I really do.
I like that. Okay, I'm gonna.
And that's what makes us St. Martiners.
Okay.
Because we are a mélange, a mixing, a beautiful collage of a little bit of everything, but still fundamentally that thing that makes us St. Martin.
Okay. And so one of the things you also mentioned, and to piggyback on nation building, is independence. That is still a buzzword that generates different type of emotions. And so one of the main questions I think I hear when the word independence is mentioned is, how can we go independent?
This is a conversation as well. You need to check out the YouTube page for real, because this is a conversation that Dad and I was having last night. And I got him to go on and make his first YouTube debut. So basically, my question to him was like, can we go independent now? Because at the end of the day, everyone is talking. We've just come out of Irma. We then had COVID. We're the world, not just us, is technically still in a pandemic, and we are on the precipice potentially of another lockdown. So when is the right time to go independent? When is the right time to have a baby? Never.
You just do it.
You have to figure it out. So I feel as if right now, if we are the mindset, it's all or nothing. When you have that hunger, that real drive, and you realize that the security blanket or the security that we think we have is a facade in itself, is not real. It doesn't exist. You would have no choice but to start fending for yourself.
So one of the things that come to mind, in addition to what you said, is so I think probably which is usually the second question, besides how can Seman sustain itself. I think that is clear, but I think it relates to the development of our institutions and fears of increased corruption and so forth.
I think sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, no, I just remember one thing.
No,
So when I said
ahead.
development of our institutions,
Yeah.
to make it more clearer, just in terms of the pillars of our democracy, which, many argue has been stretched or damaged due to, the instability we've seen in the last 11 years.
Yeah, since 10, literally. I think it's not only to the development of our institution, but the development of our people. COVID has taught the world that we live in a digital space. So you don't need to be physically anywhere to achieve anything. And digital currency is king. So if we are able to become, let's say, for example, we become that next Silicon Valley in the Caribbean region, or we become, I think, is it MP? I'm not sure if Rolando is an MP. He's an MP or MP Bryson was talking about becoming like a what was it for Amazon?
A warehouse.
Like a base.
Yeah,
for
I follow
Amazon.
you.
Yeah. In the region, that's never been done before. That could be something that we can do. But I feel like we really do need to start thinking outside of the box and not just view ourselves as tourism is going to always be a part of our industry, but we need to diversify that economy. And I feel like also supplying our own food, because you are going to need to have a way to source to feed your people.
Yeah, definitely.
So I've always said, why is it that we didn't engage? St. Maarten, our land mass dictates what we can and cannot do. But that doesn't mean we couldn't have gone into bilateral agreements with other countries that have land. Guyana, Venezuela. Do you know what I mean? And lease land that brings in and brings money to their economy, but also creates a food source for ours.
Right.
So we know that we're producing X, Y, and Z. This is going to be for our people, our nation. We can sustain ourselves. Why aren't we doing that? It just blows my mind that we have to import goods from Europe.
Yeah.
And the reason we import goods from Europe is because of the current structure that they don't want us to buy from our neighboring islands or from South America. That's not how the system is set up. Why are we still paying for, I know GB is a contentious matter right now, but we are in the Caribbean. Why aren't we on solar power or water power? Like, why are we still caught up in the traditional norms when we can be forward thinking in everything that we're doing?
Correct.
So we really need to change the way that we're currently do things, and then plan for the next century, the 21st century in a way. So I feel like that is where we'll be able to sustain ourselves when we change the mindset or thinking that, we need to have something coming in, but we could create diversity differently. Do you know what I mean? Or why aren't most of our business traded on the stock market? Like, there's just different things that we can do that can generate income in a real and substantial way. And St. Maarten makes, we are $1 billion economy, whether we choose to accept it or not. That's the reality. It's a fact. Where is that money going? Why are we third-class citizens in our own country? Why is that wealth not trickling down to individual homes like Bermuda or the British Virgin Islands? Like those, they're like, even Anguillians, I view them as wealthy because they own their land and they own their homes.
Correct.
Why don't we have that same level of standard of living?
Yeah.
It's crazy to me.
It's a lot of critical questions.
It's a lot of,
but it's necessary. You
start to think, it's like, why is the system the way that it is?
And that's the overall thing. Why is the system the way that it is? Indeed, because
it don't benefit us. It benefits who it benefits, but it don't benefit
the masses. Yeah, correct, definitely. And so an additional thing, which you mentioned was people development. So going back, even in terms of unifying both sides of the island, that aspect of nation building, continue our heritage and culture. How can we, or the average citizen, really transform their perspective and the way they see themselves? Because For example, something I often say on air is that presently our economy drives people into thinking or being servants, not producers. Because particularly if you're doing mass tourism, you don't need that much careers in, let's say, highly educational careers. You depend on a lot of low skilled labor. But even with that's concerned, I can't remember what the figure is, but when you see the literacy rate on St. Maarten, and also considering the fact that we have a very low tax compliance, I think these are all things that come together and further separate us as a people. But how can people themselves see themselves beyond the barriers, of the system we live in?
I think that's a loaded question. Right? That's a loaded question, and it's a good sign. I think you first have to believe that it's possible to see yourself out of it. Like when I gave the keynote speech for MAC a couple of years ago, I said, the future belongs to those that believe in the beauty of their dreams. And Roosevelt said that, but it's so true. But if you're unable to dream, you can't even begin to fathom a new norm. And again, it as much as you want to say, how can the people do that? The infrastructure and the institutions have to change. When you look at certain things, why is I was just trying to inquire about the mortgage and different things. Why is 4 or 5% our mortgage rates? Yeah, that's crazy. And there is no diversification to allow us to actually build wealth, because you're spending all of that money in interest. You're not building equity. How are you supposed to then? Wealth is never built in one generation; it's built in 2 or 3. So it's just like I feel like the structures that are in place in the region, not just St. Maarten, restricts and keeps us in a servitude position. Do you know what I mean? It's just like interest rates right now for mortgages in the UK is 0.5%, 1%, 2%. Anything under 3, it's a good rate. But when you're telling me, I was speaking to a friend, he was like, "Oh, you lucky that is at 4 or 5 because it was at 7%." Yeah. I'm like, what?
For decades.
And then you don't have the flexibility or the access to financial frameworks that allows you to do certain things. So you're restricted. Access to
global economy. It's just like,
Exactly. So you're so restricted. That's one aspect. Do you know what I mean? Your inability to get land. How are you selling land in itself on its own at 100,000 plus, when the average St. Martiner barely makes what's the minimum wage? $800, $1,000?
$800, yeah. 1,000, 1,500 guilders, yeah.
How, I can't even fathom that. Gross. It's like, how? Yeah. So you're trying to tell our people they're gonna be perpetually stuck in this state of lack. So it's not just you could dream as much as you want to dream, but if you don't have the access to the opportunities to get yourself out of it, that's what's gonna keep our boys on the streets. That's what's gonna have gangs and crime and everything on the rise, because poverty breeds that.
And worse. Yeah.
Poverty and crime they're like Siamese twins. So until you address the lack in households, you can never address the issue with crime. So we need diversification of the institutions on this island, more access to certain things. And I was just like, I didn't even know, not that I'm encouraging anyone to trade, I'm not a trader, but you know what I mean? But I do follow the stock market. Why? I didn't even know the Caribbean region had a stock market.
Yes.
I didn't even know that.
You have Jamaica owned.
But you know what I mean? CARICOM has its own. So it's just like, why don't we know this? Why aren't we trading?
Even us. If I'm not mistaken, in terms of
to a little extent. But then to get access to that, you then need to have a European account or a US account to then use a broker to then start trading. Why don't we have direct access? As far as I'm aware, that's how I was told to get onto the market. So you still need to use. So there are certain things that keeps us in the state that we're in.
And again, to the benefit of a few.
Indeed. So it's just like, I feel like you have to get out to come back, to then see, to then start changing the system. And most of our ministers, I feel, have had the opportunity, some, I would hope that all had the opportunity to study abroad and learn and have a different experience and come back to see, okay, how do we start implementing these things? How do we get the average person involved in understanding that the current banking system is set up saving when there's a rate of inflation at 3%, it's not going to do anything. Do you know what I mean? When you're barely making a 0.5% interest on your money. So it's just like, these are the conversations that we are supposed to have. So my debate with Daddy all the time, he's like, oh, we need political independence. I'm like, we need economical independence. For me, if you are not clear, Anthony the Rothschild said, show me who holds the purse string of a nation and I will show you who controls it.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter who's up front.
Yeah.
It's who has the,
who holds the
purse string,
branch. Yeah.
who holds the money.
Yeah.
And that's why Holland could have been coerced our government to comply to liquidity measures that was at the detriment to us. And there was nothing that we could do because we don't have the legal identity and we don't have the economical power to tell them, nah.
Keep your money. Yeah.
Keep your money.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like it's so entrenched and there's so much different layers. It's not just, oh, this is what we can do to fix this. When you truly start to understand the policies, the conventions, the legislation, the sanctions that are placed on countries, like, why does Nigeria not have its own oil refinery?
Well, I think it's finally being built.
Only now.
Yeah,
but after, they were like the oil giants of the West.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But again, it was set up how it is.
Correct.
Why are diamonds not cut and refined in Africa, even though they're found there? Again, do you know what I mean? Do you know what I mean? It's deeper than what it is, because if you do this, then you don't get funding for this, and then there's it's so messy and it's so insidious, and the more you learn, you're more darker. There's no decolonization. We're still in a you know, the concept of post-colonization, it doesn't exist. It's a lie, because the whole world is still a colony to the major powers that be.
So my segue to that was going to be your book. You followed in your family's footsteps, so you're now an author. And you have a YouTube page too, so that's the media branch of it. Tell us a little bit about that before we close out.
Okay, so I published Reflections of Mina last year, July 2020, in the middle of COVID. And obviously it was something that I personally always wanted to do. It's an anthology of poems. However, I wanted to show people whatever God has blessed you with, use it to generate an income. So I made back my cost on the first day of selling that book. So anything I make now is just profits. And it's going to be in perpetuity. So I just wanted to show people, you know, a lot of people lost their income, their jobs and what's not. But I wanted to say, whatever God has blessed you with, whatever your ability is, multiply it. What's in your hand at that particular moment, multiply it. And use it and create additional source of income. So I wouldn't consider myself a writer, because I feel like that's loads of years of dedication to your craft. Uncle Asana is a writer. Do you know what I mean? And one of the best, to be quite honest. And Uncle Fabian is a writer.
Yeah, Fabian's a great writer indeed.
Do you know what I mean? But I would say I'm a person who writes. Do you know what I mean? And I put it together, and it's just like, and following your dream and doing what you want to do. Do you know what I mean? Take it off your bucket list. That's what I wanted to do. It's something I always wanted to do. And people say, oh, obviously there's always going to be criticism and there's always going to be room for improvement. Definitely. And in the next 5-10 years, my writing style would have evolved because I would have read more and had more life experience. But if you are going to criticize, at least you would have paid me to do that. So I'm okay with it. Do you know what I mean? So Reflections of Mina, it's in dedication of my mom. It's in honor of her, because I would have not been able to be the person I am if it wasn't for her. So yeah, go and get your copy. It's on Amazon. You can get it via Kindle or a book form.
Okay.
And I'm also a budding YouTuber. And if somebody's like, why would you want to do that? Because I just want to. Yeah. I feel like in life, we think that we're only... So you study law. you became an attorney or whatnot, and that's your trajectory till you die. Why?
Yeah.
Like Michelle Obama said in her book Becoming, it's a constant evolution of becoming.
Mm-hmm.
So if I wanted to be a midwife tomorrow, I'll go and do that.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do YouTube because I've always wanted to do it. I love YouTube. That's my pastime. That's how I diffuse and unwind. I'm always on YouTube. So it's just like, let me create a space. And more so last year, because it was hard for everyone last year, mentally, emotionally, physically, financially. It was a tough year. And I wanted to do something that showed people that I was on this journey of becoming. And I'm still in the process. And to be quite honest, the doors have opened and I've had opportunities coming from left, right, and center. But I feel like when you take a chance and you leap, the universe will catch you. But you just have to believe that it's possible. So I started Ayana Tyrell's YouTube channel. It's called My Life in Black and White, because I feel like life isn't just black and white, but I called it black and white. And the same Maarten views are in color. Because to be quite honest, I don't have the time to edit it and put it in black and white. But I feel like the Caribbean is so rich and vibrant in its coloring. I don't want to take that away from it. If I'm in Europe, it's fine. It can be black and white. But because I'm home, so definitely check out my YouTube page, which is Ayana Tyrell, My Life in Black and White, and go and get your copy of Reflections of Mina. 10% of my profits that I make, I always give back to some sort of charity or organization that I think it's doing good works, because I feel like, or an individual, do you know what I mean? Whatever that is, it could be spiritual, political, whatever. If I feel like they're doing good works, I try to always contribute, because the universal law dictates once you give, it comes back in multiple forms. So that's what I do.
Nice. Thank you so much. There's just one more thing that came to mind. To build, you must destroy.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Agreed.
I'll sign off on that.
I
think about nation building.
You have to destroy.
You got to destroy. You got to wreck a couple of things.
I think I started my political position as a Leninist Marxist. And then at the end of it, I became an anarchist. So that's my position. I believe in that 100%.
Cool.
To build, you must destroy. Agreed.
All right, cool. So on that note, to our listeners, thank you so much for listening to another edition of The News Behind the News. I had a very awesome conversation. I hope that you enjoyed it. Do take care and see you next time. Take care and see you next time.